What are the most significant developments and trends in the current state of AI, and how have these advancements influencing the evolution of data centers?
It's a question that I think everybody in the data center industry is really contemplating right now. And there's really 2 points of view. One is, the service provider point of view.
How are the co-location and data center providers tackling this surge?
Flexential's in a fantastic position because we've been developing high performance compute facilities for over 10 years. And so we have these are Gen 4 and Gen 5 sites are able to cool 50 kilowatt a cabinet air cooled. And so that's without liquid cooling in there. And so we were very, very well positioned.
What are the implications for security, privacy, and compliance from a worried CISO's perspective?
We view it from a couple different angles. One being, from a service provider perspective, we want the AI companies deploying in our data centers, in our co-location facilities. And this is the infrastructure that you're going to see become commercially available.
Hi, and welcome to the Tech Transform podcast, where we have a weekly conversation with people impacting the enterprise tech landscape. My name's Tom Croll. I'm an advisor at Lionfish Tech Advisors. I've worked in the cybersecurity industry for over 20 years now, former Gartner analyst, and these days I work with vendors to ensure the use of their AI is maximized and secure in their forward journeys. I'll be your host for today. And in this episode, I'm speaking to Ryan Mallory, the President and Chief Operational Officer of Flexential, about the current state of AI and its implications for data centers, with a particular focus on high density computing and cloud infrastructure. We'll talk about the latest AI trends, including the rise of open source models and new regulations, and discuss how these advancements are driving the need for dynamic and scalable data center solutions. Welcome to the show, Ryan. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Tom. Thanks for the opportunity to join you this week. I'm really looking forward to diving into these topics. These are things that I'm passionate about, and Flexential really is focused on in trying to change and innovate in the AI marketplace.
Certainly exciting times for data centers, private and public alike, isn't it? So let's jump in with get straight in, shall we? So the first question I want to really discuss with you today was we've seen recent reports that highlight the paradigm shifting impact of AI across various industries, especially the data center industry. So in your perspective from that industry, what are the most significant developments and trends in the current state of AI, and how are these advancements influencing the evolution of data centers?
It's a question that I think everybody in the data center industry is really contemplating right now. And there's really 2 points of view. One is, the service provider point of view. The other is the consumer point of view. When Flexential looked at, the state of the AI industry, this year, we found that 90% of people surveyed are, contemplating an AI strategy, which is great news for the industry. But when you start to look at this from a service provider perspective, it's a proverbial gold rush out there. People are really focused on grabbing the power and, powered enabled land that's out there, because we need that. We're on the front end of, a kind of a 4-tiered development horizon. And we're just in that first, 4-year cycle, about 2/3 of the way through that. As we start to hit into 27 and 28, we're going to be coming out of that. And that's really the establishing of these AI infrastructure, inference nodes that are out there, and to really serve as kind of that early entry point. And then, from my point of view, we've got 2 more horizons beyond that. So, this is going to be a, tech development cycle that's going to last for 12 years. And so I'm really excited about that, looking forward to diving into both the enterprise, vertical side of that with you, as well as, the service provider side.
I imagine things are changing even in the infrastructure side of things, that you're almost planning agile some of these because we don't know what it's going to be in a couple of years' time, exactly, that we're plugging in. So with that in mind, so this AI revolution we're talking about is driving this unprecedented growth and demand for this specialized infrastructure. So how are the co-location and data center providers tackling this surge, and what strategies are you implementing to ensure scalability, reliability, and cost effectiveness in the near future.
This is something we get asked all the time. And, Flexential is in a fantastic position because we've been developing high performance compute facilities for, over 10 years. And so, we have, these are Gen 4 and Gen 5 sites are able to cool 50 kilowatt a cabinet air cooled. And so, that's without liquid cooling in there. And so we were, very, very well positioned when this market shift started to transpire about 2.5 years ago, to be able to support the requirements, on, the H100, 200 type deployments. And so we've got a lot of them deployed inside the infrastructure, not only from a service provider perspective, but we're starting to see this deployment inside healthcare and the financial vertical ramp up as well, because they have a requirement to be able to deploy this, at scale as well for some of the use cases they're working on. When you look at what's coming next, I think that's what everybody's trying to predict. And, all of our sites are liquid cooled ready, and, so you can tap into them. But, what we're really seeing is, hey, is the industry ready for these high density racks? And what I mean by that is it's more about the rack design, because as you put all of this equipment in there and you start to put the networking infrastructure, and then you want this power in there, you're really filling up that backplane of the rack. Where are you going to put the liquid cooling infrastructure? And so there's some nuances here that we've got to solve from the physical side to be able to empower the logical. I'm confident the industry will figure it out. But, at this point in time, anytime somebody asks us for liquid cooling, like, let's run a CFD, let's do an airflow study to make sure you need it, because we're running the high dense pods for, some of the companies that have recently gone public, and other companies that are out there that, you hear about in this AI, service provider realm. And we're still seeing that materialize now.
That's interesting that the plans are so advanced, and I really think, and it's a personal opinion, it's a good opportunity for private data centers or colo data centers, because I always tell clients, we need to use AI to manage AI, but we need to do this safely. And I'm supposed to be a cloud security evangelist, and even I say, like, do that stuff off the public cloud to start with. You don't really know what's going to happen. I'm not supposed to be risk averse, but I think that there's certainly a market to a market of worried CISOs out there that would have quite a warm blanket wrapped around themselves. And obviously that comes to, like, building models as well. So, and protecting them. So with the emergence of the open source models like DeepSeek and the introduction of new AI regulations in the US and the EU, for example, how are data center providers adapting to these changes, and what are the implications for security, privacy, and compliance from a worried CISO's perspective, I should probably say?
Yeah, and so it's we view it from a couple different angles. One being, from a service provider perspective, we want the AI companies deploying in our data centers, in our co-location facilities, and this is the infrastructure that you're going to see become commercially available, just like the public cloud was in 2015. And so it's an infrastructure as a service play. Just think of it as GPU as a service versus CPU as a service. And so, we're super comfortable with that. We don't interact with that data. So that's really a provider's, security vector that they've got to handle. Now, from a corporate perspective, it is something that we take very serious, and we've got an AI use policy to make sure that our employees know and understand we don't want our private critical data training public models. And so, there are capabilities, and there are AI companies that we work with to be able to segment, our data flow, so we can utilize the fantastic compute infrastructure that they have to be able to, generate our own internal models, but segmenting that from training a public model out there. And so what we're pretty careful with that, because we don't want customer information, employee information, financial information out there in a training model somewhere that can be viewed. And it's no different than the public cloud, like you were talking about, Tom. We've just got to be diligent about that and make sure people are aware of it. And, it starts to become, tempting when somebody's running a project and saying, hey, let me look at this from, a cross-reference perspective. And we're just like, just make sure you know where that data is going.
Yeah, I imagine it gives some people a little more um, a bit on ramp, a little more comforting to know that that it's locked down in one of your data centers than giving it to one of the hyperscalers at this point. And I think it's certainly a good start to the journey. So on that, I think I said in December on a podcast that we need to use AI to manage AI in security. I was talking about, but with the democratization of things like DeepSeek and bringing those things online, what is the potential for AI democratization to empower business of all sizes, and how are you contributing to the movement? What steps would you say you're taking to make AI accessible and beneficial for a wider range of organizations, not just?
Yeah, we're fully supportive of it. Very similar to the public cloud transformation that took place 10 years ago. We wanted to embrace that, and people were scared about that as well. We want to make sure that everybody has access to the AI infrastructure they want to use, and so that they have the ability to make that decision. And do they want to use Chat GPT? Do they want to use DeepSeek? Do they want to use something else that one of the hyperscalers is rolling out? All of that, it needs to be made available, and people need to understand the risks themselves. And with the platform that we're building and have spent the last 20 years enabling, we're creating the network connectivity both publicly and privately through a fabric infrastructure. So it's just think of it as a private public switching infrastructure that you gives you the ability to access the type of AI platform that you want. And so that really starts to change the game, because 44% of IT leaders are concerned that resource constraints are going to be the reason they can't use or get access to the AI infrastructure that's out there. Everybody's seeing, hey, Oracle's going to buy $40 billion worth of NVIDIA GPUs. What does that mean for the enterprise user? Well, it means that you're going to have access to a use case that's out there, in the not too distant future, instead of having to invest in the hardware yourself. It's an as a service model, and so we're here to help enable that. We want to make sure that just the same way the public internet works, that people use it responsibly, but also that people have access to it.
Yeah, I think it's only been about 5 years since the last survey of the Gartner, where we'd won the war on cloud security, or the battle, and businesses were comfortable with putting their infrastructure in the cloud. I can see there's going to be a few more steps before we really fully win that war, or persuade people to trust the cloud with their AI. Certainly, developing models. You can put these inference models in a more safe environment, but actually developing the models themselves is quite a lot of trust. So yeah, that's really interesting. So just to wrap up, Ryan, I always like to ask this question. If you could summarize one takeaway in 60 seconds from our conversation for CIOs today, what would it be and why?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing that I tell all the CIOs, COOs, CTOs that I interact with is trust but verify. AI is a powerful tool. It's not going away. Make sure that you take the time to understand what you're either deploying or what you're buying, meaning, as a service from somebody, and make sure you have a clear understanding from a security policy perspective where your data is going. We've seen customers that have, asked a question, hey, I'm tied into this, software as a service platform, but they have an AI service enabled. I'm not sure where my data is going. And that's something that we look at with them. And that's why we tell everybody trust but verify. Make sure you're asking the questions about, hey, what type of AI enablement and downstream tie-in does this have to other companies that may be pulling data or inadvertently doing some data mining with some of the applications out there. And so it's the AI is powerful from the standpoint that it allows us to increase productivity. It's never going to replace the human, because the human has to check the AI to check the AI. And so people shouldn't be as scared of it. They should figure out how to use it to make themselves much more productive, and build their overall productivity just inside and outside the workplace. But again, trust but verify.
Absolutely not a wiser word spoken. I couldn't have said it better myself, especially with integration into IDs. It's coming from every point in the enterprise where we're going to have to shield all of these potential supply chain attacks. So,
Yeah.
yeah, thanks very much. That's a really crisp piece of advice to leave us on there. Thank you very much for that nugget. So, thank you very much for joining us today. I appreciate you coming on. Also, thank you to everyone listening. We hope you took a lot away from today's podcast. For further information on what we've talked about, please head over to flexential.com, and I'm sure you can find Ryan's thoughts over there. We'll be back next week with another episode in our podcast series. Until then, make sure you subscribe to this podcast on all major platforms and follow the conversation on our socials. That's at EM360 Tech on X and LinkedIn. For more great daily content, head on over to em360tech.com. Thank you very much.